What's going on, people? We're back. May is officially over. We are into June, one of the most always kind of interesting and curious months of the summer season. And after quite, I would say, a disappointing start to the summer, we have a triple header to kick off June. We've got Bad Boys, Ride or Die. We have the premiere of Disney's latest Star Wars series, The Acolyte, and we have the release of the Richard Linklater and Glenn Powell team-up effort known as Hitman. Luke, we're back. We ready to talk about these?
We are so back.
Yes.
Back like never before.
Like never before, indeed. All of that and more on today's episode of the Talkin TV podcast. Stay tuned. Luke, I don't think that we've had an episode yet so far this year that I feel like perfectly sums up like kind of everything that the Talkin TV podcast is, which is that we have a traditionally released theatrical movie. We have a straight to streaming series, right? Miniseries, series. They haven't really decided yet. And then we have something that's sort of kind of in between, a movie that premiered at film festivals, was doing very, very well there, and then got scooped up by Netflix and released as their like summer blockbuster. It's very strange how kind of all three of these ended up on the same weekend, especially after relatively a disappointing box office for May. Furiosa and Fall Guy both unfortunately kind of plummeted at the box office. I believe the only financially profitable movie that came out of the month of May was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and even so, the reviews for that one were kind of iffy, to say the least. But this weekend, it seems like we're sort of back with the traditional blockbuster weekend. Like I said, we got Bad Boys, we got The Acolyte, and we got Hitman. All three of these, I think, are kind of like varying overall quality, and there are interesting discussions to be had about all of these. But we're going to kick it off with Bad Boys. I mean, you can't get more of a traditional, fun Hollywood franchise and blockbuster if you tried. Obviously, the first two were released by Michael Bay. The first one being actually his directorial debut, released in 95. And then the second one, you know, kind of representing the shift in his filmography, as we talked about 2 years ago on our Bayhem episode. And I mean, it's safe to say that the second one might be one of the greatest, not only sequels, one of the greatest action movies ever made. And then we have about almost a 20-year gap between 2 and 3. And then it's reported that after years of trying to get him back, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are coming back to do 3. Michael Bay's not returning to direct. Instead, we have these two new guys who will simply go by the name Adil and Bilal. This movie's the third one, Bad Boys for Life, is released in January of 2020. And because 2020 ended up going the way that it was, ended up being the most financially profitable movie released in that entire year. Not to mention probably the highest grossing movie released in January ever, I think. I would have to check the stats on that. But, I mean, the third one just like made us realize and remember what it is that we loved about these two and about these movies in general, and specifically like their dynamic. But I feel like now with the last one and this one, Adil and Bilal kind of nailed something that Michael Bay, let's be honest, it's never been his strong suit, which is the plot and the story, if you will. Now, granted, again, these movies have never been kind of known for their stories. You know, we don't watch them for their stories. We watch them because we love seeing Will Smith and Martin Lawrence and their banter back and forth. And I would argue that this one probably has the weakest story. But, like, look, do we even care at this point if the story's weak, if it's got everything else that we love?
No, I pointed out, like, in my Letterboxd review, it's typical Bad Boy shtick, but who cares? It's the chemistry between the two. That's more than enough to carry the load of the rest of the movie. And the supporting cast, like, okay, the villain, maybe not great, but the other people that they're with, the Vanessa Hudgens and the guy that maybe looks like a more buff version of me, if I'm being generous to myself.
Yeah, you remember? I remember the first Hunger Games movie.
Yeah, he's in that.
Yeah, that guy.
And the Armando. We'll talk about later, but friend of the show, Elliot, had a great tweet suggesting that they should make a Bad Sons with him and Reggie.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a setup for like a future of this franchise after Smith and Lawrence, because like as much as we love those two, they're not exactly spring chickens. They're both in their mid-50s now, and especially when you consider that now between the last one and this one, mortality seems to be a thing that these directors are really focusing. Where at the beginning of the last one, I should say, Will Smith gets shot and is in a coma for like the first 20 minutes of the movie. And then in this one, The movie literally opens with Martin Lawrence having a heart attack at Will Smith's wedding. Like, so these movies are very clearly interested, at least for the first 20 or 30 minutes before we get into the normal bad boy shenanigans, in the mortality of these two characters. So that's kind of where I first got to give them credit. And then you're right. Like, the movie just kind of devolves into typical bad boy shenanigans, you know, just Martin Lawrence making dumb cracks and Will Smith just constantly like commenting on how dumb he is and everything. And this movie, like, I feel like since the last one was focused so heavily on Will Smith, and, you know, definitely after the effects of the slap, they're like, yeah, okay, Will, we gotta pull you back a bit. You know, Hollywood people are still not sure how they feel about you, so we gotta kind of remind people why it is that they love you. And so this just kind of gives Martin Lawrence the chance to cook. And oh man, there's a reason why they originally there's a reason why Michael Bay was kind of a genius when he cast 2 sitcom stars for these parts, because oh man, the level of banter and one-liners that these two have available in their in their cachet, it's never ending, to say the least, and it's always entertaining. I mean, like, you can never not be entertained by these two. That's why, like, I kind of don't understand like criticisms of these movies where it's like you kind of only watch these for one thing. You know, it's one of the few franchises left in Hollywood. I can't even really say this about Fast and Furious, because even Fast and Furious, I thought I knew what to expect, and then Fast X came out and just blew that all up. Like, it's one of the few franchises left where you know what to expect and like can get a solid, enjoyable time. And I feel like that's kind of part of the reason why people are having such a good time with this summer, is that like last year it felt like there was an endless effort of kind of a return to normal with blockbusters, and this year it feels like they're taking more risks, which is I'm usually not opposed to, especially since for the most part I've enjoyed a majority of the movies that have come out. But it feels like regular average moviegoers really kind of don't know like what to watch, and as a result, if there's even that little bit of indecision there, I mean, we already know that that people are already having a hard enough time leaving the house when it comes to find new entertainment, and, you know, movie theaters are not doing anything to help with that. But it's kind of nice when you have like some sort of familiarity, especially in the summer, which is when, you know, the time when people are just really trying to have fun, you know, and especially given that, like, you know, movies already have all the competition in the world in the summer, given, you know, the warm weather, vacations, beaches, just really spending time outside. You know, the summer movie season, I feel like has really always had a hard time with that, but especially in recent years. So I like that this movie can kind of come along and remind us exactly why it is that we go to the movies. Because I saw this with my friend Kyle last night. We were just having an absolute blast, cracking up nonstop at all the jokes that were thrown in. This movie takes away and adds a couple of more supporting players this time. They subtract they subtract Charles Melton, who was part of the original 3 new supporting cast members in the last one. You know, because he's now kind of like a big Oscar player with his breakout role really in May, December. But I thought that he was probably one of the most entertaining parts of the last one. So I was kind of sad to see him not here in this one, but they've clearly replaced him with the Jacob Scipio character, with Armando, Will Smith's bastard son, who we found out about at the end of the last one. You know, due to his affair with the Bruja witch, as Martin Lawrence continually reminds him. It's just one of my favorite parts. The last one was when Martin Lawrence is fighting with her, and then he literally gives off the one-liner, "Let that be a lesson to your witch ass," which is one of the greatest one-liners possibly I've ever heard in a movie recently. So I guess for starters, like, I mean, what did you think of like the plot of this one? Did it really matter? You know, because at the end of the day, we've got like corruption that goes up to the top, but like, do we even know anything about like Eric Dane's character or his motivation other than, oh, he's a former Army Ranger and he went undercover with the cartels and he got tortured and now he's going to steal their money? And then you have a twist that I predicted from the minute that I predicted this too. No, from the minute the credits roll, you see Mr. Fantastic, aka Ian Gruffin, and the minute you see his name, you don't even need to see his face. You're like, bad guy. I
thought, this is San Andreas again. He
literally
turned out to be the douchebag in that one. He's going to be a douchebag in this one.
And he gets a ridiculous over-the-top death in both of those too. So in both that one and this one. As this goes so out of their way with the Chekhov's gun intro, I'm like, okay, like we know who's getting eaten by the giant alligator. Like some shit straight out of Peter Pan, ultimately. But of course, it gives Martin Lawrence an excuse to crack one of the funniest things, one of the funniest lines he's ever had, where he tries to calm down the alligator and then it bites his hand and it's an albino alligator. So he's like, man, that alligator's racist, which is just, it's incredible. Martin Lawrence never change. In terms of this movie dealing with the own inherent morality of the characters, this movie kind of gets a little Deadpool-ish in the beginning. You know what sequence I'm talking about? When Martin Lawrence like has the heart attack at Will Smith's wedding, and he like has a vision of like the afterlife where he sees Joe Pantoliano's character, Captain Howard, who unfortunately died in the last one, and he's like talking to a parrot, and it's like, oh, it's not your time yet. And then he comes back, and the whole rest of the movie, he's basically seeing like, I can't die. That's like his whole shtick for the movie. And so throughout the movie, he's doing all these dumb things that like Will Smith is constantly attempting to have to save him from. Like he walks out into traffic, he's dancing, just whipping out his dick to show off on top of a hospital roof. Like Martin Lawrence is living large in this movie, and I'm all here for it. I was talking with a couple of friends, and we were basically saying how like the entirety of the Bad Boys movies is basically just like kind of like degraded Martin Lawrence's body. Like he's almost died like a couple times, both on set of the movies and off. You know, like he almost died when he was going for a run in LA on a really, really hot day, and his body was almost like completely dehydrated to the point where he almost went into anaphylactic shock in real time. So the fact that like, honestly, he's in the best shape of his life, and he kind of gets to carry this movie in a way that Will Smith really, I mean, obviously it's a two-handed effort, but in a way that Will Smith kind of carried the last three is kind of nice and satisfying, to say the least. Not to mention, I mean, you want to talk about how well these movies tied to the last couple. Can we, like, that action sequence in the middle with Reggie, holy shit. Like, oh, man.
The 3-movie Reggie arc has been, like, a sneaky incredible, like just how it's blossomed from a joke scene in the second one to him just appearing in the third one. Like, hey, that's a nice callback, and now he's like a fan favorite again through his like an incredible action sequence.
Yeah,
we'll talk about action in a bit, but yeah, the plot wise, there was just enough of a plot to get me going. Like, okay, and the action, of course, that supplements a lot of it. And Martin Lawrence, yeah. I weirdly got like a Red Dead Redemption 2 vibe with the seeing visions and the albino crocodile at the end, which is a weird connection, I'm sure, but that's just the type of connections I make.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up as far as both the action and kind of the video game references, because there are definitely points where Adil and Bilal, as far as being kind of action aficionados, you know, obviously, you know, you had Stahelski and David Leitch revolutionizing it with, what's it called? Revolutionizing the action genre
the gun fu
with the gun fu, right? And now it's literally got to the point where like we're introducing like first person shooter into like action movies that are not based on video games, where the final action sequence, you literally have a scene where Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, and you even see all the behind the scenes that are released on Instagram and everything too, where you literally have the camera rigs are strapped to them as they're going throughout, and like it's spinning back and forth between them as it goes to the gun, and you literally feel like you're in a first person shooter video game. I mean, the way that these two shoot action is really incredible with the pans and swoops. It's like Michael Bay, but like upped a little, you know? It's really
the new generation of Bays.
It really is. And I mean, the drone inclusion, I mean, come on.
He started a revolution with Ambulance, and now everyone's doing. They tried to do it in The Gray Man. It was terrible. But here, they're the valedictorians of the Michael Bay
they really
school
are.
Of drone photography.
They really are. They're kind of the saviors of the last act of this movie, you know, where like you literally just have drones coming in and just literally dropping bombs on enemy snipers and such. I also forgot to mention that Rhea Seehorn is also in this movie as the late Captain Howard's daughter. And along with Eric Dane, that's two actors that were like really, really good in recent TV shows. Her on Better Call Saul and Eric Dane on Euphoria. And they're kind of wasted in these generic one-off parts where Rhea Seehorn's like, oh, I want revenge for my dad, especially when she finds, you know, especially when, you know, she's mad at Will Smith because it's like, yeah, your son killed my dad, you know? And she even says your bastard son to his face. I'm like, oh, God damn. And then you have Eric Dane as like the generic bad guy. You know, he was actually had like a really kind of interesting and compelling arc as Jacob Elordi's dad on Euphoria. And man, that guy's come a long way since playing Multiple Man in X-Men The Last Stand. You know, it's kind of crazy when I saw that name and I'm like, wait a minute, Eric Dane. I'm like, didn't that guy play Multiple Man in X-Men The Last Stand? And now he's here and he's just playing, you know, generic evil villains. And yeah, it's kind of a tragic waste of both of them. Like I said, it gets some compelling arcs. I mean, I guess some good moments of screen time for sure, but like I said, they're kind of just there as plot devices. I also have to say, I was not a fan of how they kind of downgraded Paula Nunez, who was like probably, again, the scene stealer of the last one, where she comes in as like potentially a love interest for Will Smith's character, and she just absolutely steals every scene that she's in, both action-wise and looks-wise. And in this one, she's relegated to being like, oh, she's engaged and dating the current potential mayor, who's not at all evil, played by Owen Gruffin. And I'm just like, man, what a downgrade, honestly. Like, probably one of the dumbest parts of the movie is when, like, it's revealed that, oh, he's the bad guy. And then he corners them in the elevator. It's like a really bad scene. It's not good, and it's kind of predictable. And then she, like, gets a cool action sequence at the end. Also, like, again, one of the few franchises to bring in, like, a new cast of supporting characters, like, back up the main characters and have them actually be useful and pretty cool. Like, I still think that one of the funniest parts of the last one is when the Alexander Ludwig character is, like, purposefully, like, you know, kind of calm and docile. And even though he's, like, 6'5" and jacked, he prefers to be the tech guy, because he, like, when he loses control, he gets a little bit over the top and just goes nuts and kills everybody. And I love how in the last one, like, Will Smith is, like, encouraging him to go, and he's like, "Don't worry, big man, I'll pay for your therapy afterwards." I just thought that bit was hilarious. And yeah, like I said, these movies are back. They're fun. They're enjoyable. With the way that they're going, I feel they can make like 5 more of these movies. They could make them the exact same movie. They're still going to be fun and entertaining every time. You know, it just comes in under 2 hours. They don't overstay their welcome. And like I said, as far as them setting up Armando and Reggie, I mean, I kind of want to see the future, like, Bad Boys, The Next Generation, and it's those two, you know, like, because I can honestly see that being really sick. Because again, with one sequence, Reggie kind of steals the movie, especially after Martin Lawrence already making a joke about how he was just kind of sitting around, and he's like, I'm a Marine. I'm like, I just got deployed and now I'm back. And he's like, you need to get a job. And then he ends up, like, totally redeeming himself. It's just great.
I will say I did get a little sick of the trailer, but seeing before every movie.
Yeah.
But it was worth it. Like,
yeah.
Like, you can get the trailer and it'd be a bad movie, but this one it lives up.
This one, it lives up.
All those moments are just a lot funnier in full context of the movie.
Well, also, not to mention the fact that the trailers are so, like, gratuitous in terms of giving you, like, the whole movie. This trailer gives you the entire movie. It gives you the entire movie, like, the entire first half of the movie, pretty much, like, almost to a T. So just in terms of, like, wow, I am really trying to avoid trailers going forward, because they like, you get the entire movie. It's like people wonder why, like, these studios wonder why nobody's going to see these movies in theaters. And it's like, maybe because they know everything that's going to happen in the movie just by watching the trailer. You know, I've been saying this for 8 years now, since Batman versus Superman, and Hollywood has unfortunately not learned any of their lessons. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see where it goes forward. We got 2 other things to talk about before we head out of here. But, Luke, what is your final thoughts and star ratings for Bad Boys Ride or Die?
My final thoughts. What a movie. What a great opening to the June part of the summer season. And I want to see, like, 3 more at least.
Honestly.
But Adil and Bilal, look, there were those rumors they want to do Spider-Man. Let them do Spider-Man. You'll get the greatest Spider-Man action sequences in history. I could just imagine, like, him fighting Scorpion or something.
If they were to do, like, well, who are the villains that are rumored? If it's like Scorpion, if it's like Mr. Negative, Kingpin, yeah, but there was one other one, and Shocker. If it was, and I think they were going to bring back Shocker as well. It's like Shocker, Scorpion, and Mr. Negative. And if Daredevil's in there, oh my God, it'll be the greatest Spider.
And then the symbiotes always crawling around.
Of course. Always.
So 4 stars.
Yeah, I would agree. I gave this one 4 stars. It was really solid. My only kind of nitpick critique, besides kind of the wasting of Seahorn and Eric Dane, is I think they screwed up with the titles. I think the last one should have been Ride or Die, and I think this one should have been For Life, since it's, you know, the 4th one. I
thought they didn't know they were going to do a 4th one.
Yeah, they clearly didn't know they were going to do a 4th one, but still, like, it a missed opportunity, guys.
But, like, it made a lot of money, so people clearly wanted to see more Will Smith.
Yes,
Chris Rock was deserved to be
Chris Rock apparently wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. I guess Chris Rock's got to make his own version of Bad Boys now. All right, moving on. Next we have the
boys.
Boys. Let's go. And they still don't know the words to that freaking song. Like, guys, it's been 20 years. You still haven't learned the words to that song. It's not that hard. Google, like YouTube Music and Spotify lyrics are a thing. Anyway, so moving on to The Acolyte. So this is an interesting one. As we know, Disney has been in a little bit of a rough patch for the last couple of years, particularly with Star Wars. I think it's safe to say that their efforts on Disney Plus have not been as fulfilling as we would have hoped, considering that after the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, which were pretty freaking awesome, we were unfortunately inundated with such disappointing efforts as The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor was a nice, refreshing surprise in terms of how excellent it was. And then Andor was unfortunately followed up by The Mandalorian Season 3 and Ahsoka, which were both better, I would say, than the efforts that we got in 2022, but still not enough to really, I would say, like, prove that Disney is kind of back with Star Wars. And unfortunately it has not really proven that Star Wars really should be making any more live action efforts outside of their animated efforts, which again have been great. Bad Batch Season 3 just wrapped up its run earlier this year, and I thought it was once again an incredibly touching and a heartfelt finale. It's a great way to say goodbye to those characters that we've spent the last couple of years with. And now we have the Acolyte, which this is an interesting one because this is a show that takes place about 100 years before the events of Phantom Menace, so during the high age of the Republic. It's got an entirely brand new cast, and due to the nature of when it takes place within the Star Wars canon, at least to my knowledge, we don't have any familiar characters that we're known with. So this is kind of breaking new ground in a sense.
Yoda can show up. He probably
will. Well, Yoda can show up for sure, but for the most part, he hasn't. And this is the first Star Wars property that is finally dealing with characters and storylines we are unfamiliar with that we have not seen before, right? It's got a pretty loaded, very diverse cast, as we know, definitely measure up to Disney's new diversity and equity inclusion standards, consisting of Amandla Stenberg, Lee Jung Jae, Daphne Keane, Manny Jacinto, Charlie Bartlett, what's it called? A couple other faces. Jodie Turner-Smith is in here as well. And the series is showrun by Leslie Headland, who directed a film back in 2015 that I was a very big fan of. It's a movie called Sleeping with Other People with Jason Sudeikis and Alison Brie. It's a very, very good movie, very charming, a good spin on the rom-com genre. I would definitely recommend checking that out. And after watching the first 2 episodes of this series, they're releasing it weekly, I gotta say, I'm intrigued. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It's not, I will say that kind of the fact that these are entirely new characters definitely has me intrigued, to say the least, to follow the story as far as seeing where it's going to go, because I feel this is the first time I'm watching a Star Wars show and I don't know where it's going to go. Because even with Ahsoka, even though that takes place after Rebels, because that's still in that space of, Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, where it's kind of that era right after the events of Return of the Jedi and like the kind of the construction of the New Republic and the fall of the Empire, I feel like I'm still kind of familiar with that, not to mention the fact that since that was kind of a follow-up to the Rebels show, it really just felt like, again, continuation of arcs and characters we were, again, already familiar with. So I feel like we really weren't treading new ground. This is the first time where we essentially are. And again, we're following Amandla Stenberg's character as she plays twins, both of whom are, trained in the ways of the Force and the Jedi. They're orphans that were, unfortunately caught in a forest fire that destroyed their fire and killed their parents. They were saved by 4 Jedi. The one was taken in by the Jedi Order and now has since left and has become like a mechanic on a ship. The other one is like become super evil, and the opening scene of the first episode is her assassinating Carrie-Anne Moss, who is also in the show. And it's funny because with the amount of cast members that were in the show, I'm like, okay, we have this is kind of how predictable Star Wars has become. I'm like, okay, we have the one white Star Wars character who is not covered in green paint or is not Asian or black or Hispanic, dead within the opening scene. And so, because I'm like, that's how these things always start. They always have to kill a character off in the opening scene in order to, get the plot going. And yeah, proved me exactly right. Exactly right. And it's kind of going to be interesting watching the rest of the show, seeing how like the unfortunate reliance and still adherence to those ridiculous diversity and equity and inclusion standards are definitely going to kind of inhibit what could potentially be an interesting story. Again, it's a little bit of an assassin and conspiracy plot. So I am intrigued. Luke, what were your thoughts on these first 2 episodes?
Look, Star Wars used to be my absolute number one shit. Like, you remember we did the script reading.
Yes.
That was just awesome. But now it's like I just cannot get excited for anything Star Wars remotely. Like, I almost forgot to watch this, and then you mentioned it, like that we were covering. I have to watch it.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Like, I like that it's completely separate from anything like the 100-year gap, like you said. I enjoy the cast. Squid Game man, I forget his name.
Lee Jung Jae.
Lee Jung Jae,
the guy who stole Bob Odenkirk's Emmy 2 years ago.
He's great. He's good in it. I like Amanda Stenberg. I will say this: if I remember to, I will continue watching it because there's 3 other shows coming out
Yes.
this month. The Boys, House of the Dragon, and The Bear that are much bigger priority. If I remember to, I will continue watching this because I was not too hooked by it.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, I liked what I saw. The thing about it is, for me, I like this era of Star Wars. This is probably my favorite era of Star Wars, you know, the era of the High Republic, in the sense of where, because we're told so much about kind of like the faults and flaws of the Jedi, but actually getting to see, but because the nature of the prequels, the kind of how they had to go, you really didn't get a chance to like see that. And I like seeing that in real person. That's interesting. But again, you hit the nail on the head, which is that Star Wars has unfortunately done so much damage to its own brand since being purchased by Disney. It's like you really can't get excited for it anymore. It's kind of lost that epic feeling, and kind of it being devolved, it really just feels like TV rather than like an event to get excited for. And it really has become more of an obligation to watch rather than something that's actually like enjoyable, that people actually want to see ultimately. And it's really sad and distressing ultimately that it's come to that point, especially when they could be good, you know, and or prove that there are still people capable of telling good stories within the Star Wars universe. But unfortunately, man, like if they just keep going with this direction, you know, we've got Skeleton Crew that's coming out in December. You know, they've greenlit all of these movies that who the hell knows if they're ever going to get made. Supposedly Mandalorian and Grogu is coming out in May of 2026. We'll see if that
Did you see
actually
what
happens.
the Minions marketing team did?
No, I did not.
In Despicable Me 4, there's these mega minions, basically.
I
Like
did
the
see the trailer
Fantastic
for that
Four.
yesterday. Yeah.
And there's a video of Steve Carell like announcing like 80 years of Mega Minions movies. So, it's very much like a Marvel Phase
That's
6
funny.
kind of look. So, and this is just another example of that.
Yeah.
Like when they made those announcements about what is it,
well, it was the Rey movie, the High Republic movie that James Mangold was supposed to do, and then the Mandalorian movie that
I'm like, maybe one of these will get made.
Yes, if any. If any. They're still very
we actually have
adamant.
a release date for the Mandalorian one, so
yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, because people love Grogu. They love those Grogu plush dolls.
But yeah, there's nothing that can get me excited. Like they're gonna do Episode X at this point. Like I'm convinced.
Yeah, they will. They will. Yeah, it's distressing, honestly. It really is. You know, like the Disney, unfortunately, is really of all the franchises that have kind of been tarnished recently, Disney really has done the most damage to the Star Wars brand. And it's one of those things where everybody knows it. Kind of universally, it's known. Kathleen Kennedy has kind of done a really, really terrible job of managing and mismanaging the brand and kind of driving it into the ground. All of the problems that have come with all the previous properties that have just been really kind of disappointing overall. They really have become more of an obligation and a chore really to get through rather than something that actually get excited about. Yeah, I mean, I've only seen the first 2 episodes, so I can't really say. I am going to make an attempt to continue watching this going forward. But yeah, like you said, we have The Boys on Thursday, we have House of the Dragon on Sunday, and then we have The Bear 2 weeks after that. Like we have our TV obligations set as far as for both June and the rest of the summer goes. So like I said, we'll keep this conversation nice and short because there is another streaming title that I do want to get to rather than the Acolyte, and that is Hitman. Now, this is an interesting one. So before we get into the topic of conversation, there's a reason why this one I think merited the most amount of conversation. What did you hear and know about this movie before watching it?
Well, I think it premiered at TIFF, right? And I know some people who saw it there and they really enjoyed it. And then I know some people who saw it at somewhere in England. It's one of those film festivals, and they really enjoyed it. Like, is this going to be Hitman? To steal the obvious joke there. So I was very excited for it. I saw it actually had a Latvian release in theaters. I was going to go see it, but I was writing my thesis. And by the time I finished, it was on streaming. So I figured I'm just going to watch it there. And I knew it's Richard Linklater. I've only seen School of Rock, but that was really good. So I knew. And Glenn Powell, he's just emerging. He's everywhere. He's going to be in Twisters as well. And he's just great in everything. So it was everything was lined up for it to be a great movie, and it was.
Yeah, there's a couple of like preliminaries that I want to read off before we actually talk about this movie. And for the first things first, being all of the movies that I've seen Glenn Powell in, so some including Spy Kids 3D, Game Over, Expendables 3, Ride Along 2. He's got a bit part in a couple other gems. Some really, really
The Dark
Great
Knight
Netflix
Rises.
gem, set it up. The Dark Knight Rises, obviously, he's one of the stock exchange brokers that gets kidnapped by Bane. His infamous line, "This is the stock exchange. There's no money here." And Bane's like, "Really? Then why are you here?" It's absolutely great. He's recently, obviously, again, he broke out in Top Gun. He recently spoke about how, Top Gun getting delayed really cost him, like, some money, which, again, okay. And then, recently this past Christmas with Anyone But You. But yeah, Hollywood hasn't done this in a while, where they're really trying to tout, like, their new golden boy. Like, this is it. This is the new it man. This is the new guy to follow. This is our new movie star, right? And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I seem to remember when Hollywood tried to do this really hard with Sam Worthington and Taylor Kitsch back in the early 2010s, around like circa 2009 and 2012. And well, we all know how that went for those two, with Taylor Kitsch having back-to-back bombs with John Carter and Battleship in the same year, and Sam Worthington leading the highest grossing movie of all time, Avatar, and then following that up with Man on a Ledge and some other really, really excellent movies. Clash of the Titans. Yeah, proving my point. So let's just say that while I do like Glenn Powell, I do think that he does have charm and does have the capabilities to be a good leading man. I do worry that he is kind of getting suckered into a position that ultimately has proven to fail more people recently, especially since we are living in the age of IP and streaming, and it is really hard for kind of movie stars to break through, honestly, I feel like people have been having a lot more success with that on TV rather than film. And so there's that. Then you have the Richard Linklater pieces, where Richard Linklater has probably got one of the most fascinating filmographies ever. And there's really two types of movies that he really likes to do. The movies that I think he thrives in, which are, again, the down-to-earth movies just about, like, people being people and dealing with, like, love, tragedy, the mundanity of life. Such efforts that I think really demonstrate this are, Dazed and Confused, School of Rock, which ironically is a paycheck job for him. Like, I think it's really funny that, like, that's considered a Richard Linklater movie, when I'm like, yeah, this is so clearly a paycheck job for him, but he just does it really well. Like, the script and the lead performance from Jack Black are so good and carry that movie. The Before trilogy, obviously, being one of his most well-known ones, and then obviously what I think is probably one of his most underrated efforts, that being Last Flag Flying with Steve Carell, Bryan Cranston, and Lawrence Fishburne, which is just so touching and heartbreaking. Those, to me, are where he really thrives and really, really does well. And then you have the movies where he likes to get weird and a little experimental. He sometimes succeeds with that. Movies like Tape and A Scanner Darkly, where he experiments around with the format. Newton Boys, Suburbia, and just some recent efforts that just have not worked out well. Where Do You Go, Bernadette? There's Bernie, the movie that he did with Jack Black and Matthew McConaughey in the early 2010s, which is funny and enjoyable, but, like, he does like to get a little weird sometimes, and that's where he becomes a little bit more hit or miss. Obviously, and then you have his big experiment, Boyhood, which was filmed over the course of, 14, 15 years, or however long that was. And, well, outside of the gimmick of the movie, it's like, I still don't think that movie has aged very well, ironically enough. And so now you have this effort, where he is telling the story of a movie that is sort of kind of based on a true story. They were kind of vague about that. And you have Glenn Powell playing a dorky college professor who doesn't really have a social life, who moonlights as a technician guy for the FBI, and then one day is kind of basically assigned last minute, okay, you have to go in and talk to this guy and, like, basically, like, entrap them, essentially. And he loves it so much that he ends up kind of, like, making that, like, his new pastime, where he essentially ends up creating and crafting various different assorted characters in order to pose as these different hitmen, in order to entrap people who want to hire hitmen in order to make their lives easier. And it kind of turns into this. When I first started this movie, I'm like, I don't really know where this is going. But then about the middle half, I'm like, okay, I think I see where this is going, especially when Adria Arjona comes in. And I'm just like, oh, put her in more movies, please, because she has been one that is, again, some hits, some misses, to say the least, over the last couple of years. Definitely some better efforts on TV, with her turn in the second season of True Detective and Andor, ironically, as well. So she's had some hits, to say the least. But I mean, she just stuns the minute that she walks in on stage and on screen, I should say. And the movie kind of
she makes it a stage. That's just
truly
how
does. She
how
truly
she
does. I mean, good Lord, I don't remember the last time that I've seen someone that just won me over like instantly, like by being just that effortlessly gorgeous and attractive. Not to mention that, like, oh man, we finally have a sexy movie again. We finally have a sexy movie in an age that has almost completely killed off sex in movies. We finally got a sexy movie back. And so like I said, the middle act of the movie is really probably where this movie hits the highest, where it's this really interesting talk on identity and like kind of, you know, living in, kind of coming into your own, becoming confident in terms of pursuing exactly what you want, but also kind of what the twist off to that is, you know, where is the line as far as you know, when is going too far? Like, is this guy actually a sociopath? Because again, the amount of research that he's putting into it. And then the second half kind of does this really interesting twist where it kind of turns into like this old-fashioned noir, where he realizes that this character that he's fallen madly in love with is like a lot more devious than he previously thought. And he realizes that he's kind of gotten himself into hot water. And then we get to the third act. And I would say for me, and I'll let you know, and let me know if you agree with this or not, but this movie has a very clear direction that it's going in terms of where, if it had ended in a certain way, I think it would have been phenomenal. And this would be one of the best movies of the year. That is not the ending that we got. And the ending that we got instead, I have to say, I'm not going to lie, might be one of the dumbest endings I've seen of any movie this year. And really, I think ruins what is otherwise a pretty awesome and pretty thought-provoking movie in a manner that I was certainly not expecting. So your thoughts, and like I said, this movie was getting rave reviews coming out of all the festivals. TIFF, they loved it. New York Film Festival, they loved it. And then, you know, you have the Netflix of it all, where Netflix kind of scoops in and took what otherwise might have been a pretty interesting and different sort of maybe awards movie, and they drop it as a kind of their summer blockbuster. Netflix is really weird when it comes to summer blockbusters. But so now kind of we're in this situation, and I wanted to know first your thoughts on the movie, and then like if you agree with me on my thoughts on the ending.
Well, I enjoyed the movie for the most part. It like you said, it's like an old school movie with a modern coat of paint, if you will. It was one thing, and then it turns into another thing. Like it's kind of a rom-com type of situation. But I do agree, the ending I was a bit, huh?
Yeah.
That's it, and but it didn't ruin the movie for me. I still would give it a fairly high rating, and I would recommend it because the rest of it was just that good, and the chemistry between them was like unreal, effortless. So,
well, because you know what it is? It's that thing of where like I really, really want to enjoy it, but there's not enough throughout the movie for me to enjoy. Like I said, I really like Glenn Powell. I really like Adria Arjona. But like everything else, like the dumb little supporting characters and everything that are kind of just there as comic relief, and they kind of like turn it like the Retta and the other guy, you know, the Indian guy, they kind of like ground it and turn it into like almost like a sitcom essentially, and it kind of takes away from me from more of the serious dramatic elements. And like the moments where he is like coming up with all of these different characters with all these different crazy looks and accents and everything, like he gets to be a redneck, he gets to be this crazy, insane British character. I think he does a Russian accent at one point. He gets to be Patrick Bateman, right? He gets to be like all these different characters, and I'm just waiting, and I'm like, I really need to see like some sort of a really interesting payoff, because he's kind of putting a little bit and like obviously, yeah, they set him up as like this bored college professor who kind of does this just on the side, right? And like Glenn Powell proves that he can be like a solid actor and movie star. Like he handles all the beats really well. He does he does all of that stuff really, really well. I think kind of the back and forth between like, you know, how he like carefully constructs this awesome, confident character that the Adria Arjona character completely falls in head over heels for. And like, again, it's kind of awesome when you're seeing him like, and like, wow, he's playing a character, but he's really this like kind of this dorky, like kind of, isolated loner weirdo. And I thought that part was really fascinating, but I'm like, I needed to see more. I needed to see like a deeper dive into that psychology. We got a little bit of it in the beginning when he's talking with his ex-wife. And I thought that conversation was like really fascinating, how she's like breaking down the different elements of personality. And that was a really good setup, but I needed to see kind of a little bit more in terms of like kind of what his motivation was, you know, like maybe like an extra scene or two that really breaks down psychology wise, like what it is that he's feeling when he's like adopting all these characters, you know, and he has that scene in the courtroom as well, where he's kind of where the lawyer is trying to say like, yeah, you're basically entrapping these guys, you know, at what point kind of is it that you are these characters? At what point does it stop being a job for you? And he kind of like, again, like kind of dives into and uses some of that newfound confidence that he has in order to in order to throw off the lawyer's questions. I think the biggest thing about this movie is that it's a great movie for if you want to just watch good, interesting acting. Because, like, from an actor standpoint, this is definitely one of the more fascinating movies that has come out this year, where you are essentially watching a guy play one guy that then has to become all this assortment of other characters. And that's kind of, to me, where the intrigue comes in. And the rest of the movie, right, is kind of, again, this, like, think piece, noir, rom-com. It's playing around with genres, which I do like. I do really, really like that. Just, man, that ending. Like, to break it down for people, you essentially have it where, okay, so halfway through the movie, right, it turns out that Adria Arjona, who claimed that she was getting a divorce from her husband after she was originally going to attempt to hire Glenn Powell as the hitman to take out her husband, and then obviously they fall in love and everything, and she gets the divorce, so she says, but then they run into her husband outside of the club. Turns out they are not getting the divorce, and he's like kind of really angry, and then the husband tries to hire Glenn Powell as the hitman, and then Glenn Powell reveals himself and the husband disappears. Next thing you know, the husband turns up dead, and Glenn Powell's like, oh, I know who did this, you know? And it's very obviously, and then Adria Arjona just tells him straight up in a scene that I was not expecting at all. She's like, oh yeah, I killed him. And he's like, wait, what? Like he so wanted it to not be her, and then it turned out it was. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, this has become the noir ending. We know how this is gonna end now. And then so they managed to cover it up, right? Where he basically like manages to, you know, he's sent in to entrap her. He kind of manages to fool her into not giving it away and confessing it. And they almost get away with it. But then Austin Amelio's character, Dwight from The Walking Dead, comes in and is like, yep, I figured out this whole thing. You know, I've been following you since the get-go because I wanted my job back. And now I found out that you guys concocted this whole thing. And then Adria Arjona drugs him and they just let him die. And then they go off and get married and have kids and live happily ever after. And I'm like, what? Like, hold on. Back up a second. Like, no cut twos. Like, no, oh, he has to explain how Austin Amelio just died. They don't show him quitting his college class. Nothing. It's just like, oh, he's just in this life now. And that's it. I'm like, I needed at least a solid 10 or 15 more minutes explaining, like, what happened in the in-between. Because that kind of, I'm sorry, that was not it. That ending was just not it. As far as how this should have ended, what should have happened is he comes over to, afterwards, after the fake confession, and sees Austin Amelio there. She kills Austin Amelio, and then he's like, okay, everything's going to be fine. Then he kills her, and then goes off and like, is like, okay, I'm in this life now, and he becomes like a real hitman. That, to me, would have been the really real, that to me is like, oh, that turns this into like a 5-star movie, you know?
Yeah, because I was waiting for him to be like, okay, he's actually gonna have to hitman someone.
Right.
And then he kind of does, but it's kind of with no build-up.
Not really, though, because
just like,
she still drugs him. So he just kind of helps her out. So, like, he just
doesn't save him. In the end.
Exactly.
Just,
right. Or another version of the ending is he like ends up getting her sent to jail, you know? And then she ends up like getting out like a couple years later and targets him. Like there's so many different
Hitman too.
Exactly. There's so many different possibilities as far as endings that this could have gone. And they just pick like the worst possible ending where it's like, oh, this is a rom-com now. And I'm like, but that's not what you set up at all. Like at all. That was like I'm like, this was clearly a noir movie. And it's really confusing to me for Richard Linklater, somebody who I think for the most part does understand genre pretty well. And then he goes and does this, and it just has me scratching my head being like, what the hell were we thinking here? Like, what actually happened? And honestly, it doesn't take away my ability to recommend this to people, but it does, unfortunately, kind of really, I think, take this down a peg because I really wanted this, and this was shaping up to be one of the best movies of the year. You know, again, this was kind of released in festivals in 2023, but it's another movie that kind of, again, because of the stacked nature and the strikes that came out in 2023, where this kind of, again, is another one that comes out in 2024 after Dune 2 and Challengers. And I gotta say that, again, aside from Dune 2, kind of drops the ball, unfortunately. Pun intended, very much so, as far as the reference back to Challengers. And yeah, I really, really wanted to recommend this to people. And man, I'm getting really sick of these movies because I had a lot of problems with movies that were like this, that were released in the second half of the 2010s, were movies that were like so close so close to being awesome and then just completely dropped it at the last minute. And it really, again, unfortunately, like this for the majority of this movie, I was between about a 4 and a 4.5. And after that ending, I gotta say, this goes down to a 3.5 for me. It really does, because that ending kind of exposes some of the other problems that I had with the movie, you know? And as far as like my future thought process on it, I may come back to this one day and think, oh yeah, this was kind of really interesting. But as far as like this being one of the best efforts of the year, I mean, it's good, it's solid, enjoyable, but the rest of it, yeah, I don't know if I can really say if I can really say I personally enjoyed this. I think people will like this purely because of the chemistry between the two leads, but that's really about it, honestly.
Well, I would have to say that they did not ruin it for me as much as it did for you. I would still very much recommend it to people. Is it my top 5 of the year? I think it was, but
Well, I mean, given just how slim pickings this year has been,
bit of a dry year so
Yeah.
far. Yeah, it just nips the top 5.
Yeah.
But no, I like the old schoolness of it. Like we should have more movies of this scale, like this,
Yes.
and challengers. Like
I agree.
Kind of that kind of budget wise, and just get a big name actor, put some supporting actors, boom.
Yes, I
Easy.
agree. I agree, 100%.
Like,
And actually,
like the who said the who won for American Fiction Best Adapted Screenplay?
Oh, Cord Jefferson.
Don't make one $200 million movie. Make $25 million movies.
Exactly. Yeah. And like my whole thought process is that even though this one didn't necessarily work for me, I still would like more efforts like this, in the sense of where, again, studios divvying up their efforts. And again, because with this constant back and forth problem of they only ever want to make these $200 million blockbuster events when almost nobody actually goes to see movies in theaters anymore. It's like, why wouldn't you just, again, diversify your efforts, make a bunch of $40 to $50 million mid-budgeted level movies with interesting scripts, good actors, you know, that actually gives them interesting parts. Like, we do want more movies like this. I don't want that to be misconstrued. I do want more movies like this. If anything, again, I just want more of them. I just want more of a diversified palette, which is kind of what I've been complaining about really over the last couple of years. And, you know, kind of we're done with COVID now. So I'm hoping that things are going to go that way ultimately. But, you know, who knows? We'll see. So as far as my final thoughts and star ratings, again, 3.5 out of 5 stars, unfortunately. You know, it may go up to a 4 as time goes on. But for now, yeah, like I said, that ending really, really took this down a peg for what was otherwise a really interesting and different kind of a movie than I was expecting, especially from the typical summer blockbuster slate.
Yeah, for me, it's a solid 4. There's a lot of 4s this year. Between this and Abigail and Challengers,
Yeah,
it's a decent year so far. Just not a
nothing like
complete hitter.
Yeah, amazing and groundbreaking. I would agree, honestly. It's for me
Other
personally.
than Dune, of course.
Other than Dune and Fall Guy.
And Fall Guy.
Yeah, Fall Guy's great.
But
I don't.
Dune's a little.
Yeah, Dune. I again, it's like I said, every other movie this year could pack it up and go home after Dune, and I have not been proven wrong so far.
No, I don't think you will.
Yep, I really don't. I really don't.
There's no unless.
There really is. There isn't. And it's winning Best Picture and Director. So, yeah. All right. With that being said, Luke, that was it. That was our kind of kickoff to June. Like I said, we've got some more interesting episodes. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to do, like I said, so just a bit of housekeeping behind the scenes. We are officially kicking off our recap shows for the summer. We are doing The Boys every Thursday night after the episode airs. What's it called? And then we will be doing House of the Dragon every Sunday after the episode airs. So those will be going kind of throughout the rest of June into July. And I believe August, which is when House of the Dragon will season 2 will wrap. So those will be commencing. Luke, as you also well know, Lost is premiering on July 1st. I still have yet to come up with a
Lost
release
is premiering.
Well, sorry, Lost is dropping all of the episodes on Netflix on July 1st. So we will be commencing that recap. I still have yet to decide whether I'm going to air these episodes live on YouTube or whether I'm going to release them, pre-record them, and then release them at a later date. I still have yet to decide that, but whatever the case is, I will let you know, because like I said, we are about to get Lost all over again. But yeah, that's a behind the scenes of what we have coming up on the show, on the channel. Be sure to stay tuned for all of that going forward. And I also have another couple of edited videos that I'm working on behind the scenes as well, because I had so much fun with my top 10 movies turning 10. I want to, and now that I'm done with school and I have more time, I plan on doing more of those efforts. So that's just some things to look forward to for the channel going forward. Luke, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They should follow me at Look Reviews on YouTube because someone unsubscribed yesterday.
Oh,
They will miss out on 2 great videos in July, hopefully. Disaster movie tier list in honor of Twisters and revisiting the X-Men movies of the Fox era one last time before we officially shift into the new X-Men era MCU with Deadpool and Wolverine. So we'll keep an eye out for that. And of course, the Lost recap
yes.
series, which I'll be watching for the first time. So you'll be getting a diverse view on things.
Yes, yes, indeed, you will. It's going to be really interesting to see your thought process of that. And of course, people, you can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to follow, be sure to subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. Like I said, we're recording this on a Monday, but I had a little bit of a long weekend, so this episode will be available tomorrow. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies and TV. We'll see you guys next week for House of the Dragon and the boys.